Hey friends, what up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're starting Daf Yud Beis, Daf 12, Moed, Katan. Friends, Daf Yud Beis is a daf. I mean, I feel like every line on Daf Yud Beis, you could write a chapter in a halacha sefer. Talk about different type of employment, employment agreements, what the nafkaminas are for Shabbos, and all sorts of stuff. I mean, we're just going to scratch the surface, but I'd imagine that there's like a halacha svarim dedicated to just these lines of Gemara. So anyways, let's jump in. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting concepts here about different kinds of employments and what the nafkaminas are in terms of a Gentile doing melacha for a Yid on Shabbos and different things related to melacha on chol Moed as well. Friends, we are on Daf Yud Beis, Amud Aleph, all the way at the top. Amr Shmuel, so says Shmuel, what does he say? Mekabel kibolos b'soch atchum osir. So Mekabel kibolos, if you have a Gentile, and he's going to do work for you, but there's no deadline, kilu. So you make an agreement with him, and you give him some work to do, and there's there's no deadline. So b'soch atchum. So if it's within the Tchum Shabbos, so, he's kind of, he's just deciding to do the work on his own whenever he wants to, but it's within the Tchum Shabbos, and people will see and they'll know, that's Ruvain's, right, that person's doing malacha for Ruvain. So we don't want people to get the wrong idea that they're doing malacha for you on Shabbos. So also, it's not allowed. Chutz l'Tchum, mutter. But if it is outside of the Tchum Shabbos, and then the assumption is that people don't necessarily know that he's doing the malacha for you, so then it would be permitted. Omer Papa says, Papa vafilu chutz l'Tchum. And even when we're talking about outside of Tchum Shabbos, that we're saying that if this Gentile is doing malacha, it would be okay. That's only if there is not a city that is close by. But if there is a city that is close by, so then it would not be allowed. Because again, people might recognize that, that person is doing work for this Yid. And they might think that, Kilu, you gave him the work to do on Shabbos. Omer Rav Misharsha says, and even if it's outside of Tchum Shabbos and there is no nearby city, and even so it's outside of the Tchum Shabbos, there's no other cities around, but still it would only be permitted, this arrangement with this Gentile who's just, there's no deadline and the Gentile is just doing the work whenever he feels like it. Still, the work would only be able to be done outside of Tchum Shabbos when there's no cities around, there's no other town around, if it's on Shabbos and Yom Tif when Yidden aren't out and about. But anybody who's been to Eretz Yisrael knows on a chol Moed, the entire flippin' country is out and about, except for me, obviously. But everybody else is out and about. So then the people out about, they're going to see that this fellow is doing work for you. So then they might think that, you gave him the work to do on chol Moed, so that would taka not be allowed. Right? But on chol Moed, when the whole country is renting cars and driving all over the place, so then you would not be allowed, or this Gentile would not be allowed to do melacha for a Yid, even when there's like no deadline and he can just kind of do it when he wants to. So Mar Zutra, the son of Rav Nachman, the Gentiles built for him a palace. However, they you had this kibolos arrangement that they just kind of did work when it was convenient for them, and they did this outside of the Tchum Shabbos. Ikler Rav Safar Rav Huna bar Chinan of Lo Olu Legabe, and Rav Safar and Rav Huna bar Chinan were unwilling to go inside of this palace because it was built by these Gentiles on Shabbos. Those who say that even Marzuch Breder of Nachman refused to go into the house that was built for him because it was built by Gentiles on Shabbos. But 1 second, didn't Shmuel say that when it comes to this arrangement where there isn't necessarily a deadline and the Gentiles can do work on their own terms, so Shmuel said, as long as it's outside of the Tchum Shabbos, it's permitted. So that's exactly what this was. So what was the problem? So the Gemara says, well, a very important fellow like Marzuch Breder of Nachman is different, and therefore he's on, sort of on a higher madrega to the extent that even though it was outside of the Tchum Shabbos, he shouldn't have had Gentiles building his palace for him on Shabbos. That those who say, well, he, sort of supported them in their work, still not on Shabbos, but he provided the straw for them in their work, and therefore they would guess it was ki'ilu. He sort of assisted them in their work in some way, and therefore, they didn't, Rav Safar, Rav Huna Bar Chinada, maybe even Marzuch Breder of Nachman didn't want to go into the palace. Rav Chama Shara lehu le'avungre devei reish gelusa lemebed lehu avidta b'chula demoada. So Rav Chama permitted it sounds like sort of like the maintenance workers at the Reish Gelusa's residence, lemebed lehu avidta b'chula demoed, to do work on chol hamoed. Rav Chama says that these people who would like fix tables and things like that they were allowed to do their work on chol hamoed at the residence of the Reish Gelusa Omar, and Rav Chama's reasoning his rationale was, Kevin de agra lo kashakle, since they don't receive payment in like money, sharshuye hu dekam misharshu, rather they get indirect benefit, and therefore there's no problem with that. That these maintenance workers, they wouldn't be paid with money, they would be paid with their sudis. They would be paid with food. They would come and they would, fix whatever things they had to fix, and then they would get paid by having a meal. So it's not exactly like being paid with money, and therefore it's sort of indirect payment. It's considered at least indirect payment, and therefore that's why Rav Chama permitted them to do their thing on chol hamoed. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taka taught, mekabel kibolos b'moed la'asosa le'achar hamoed. Okay, so the rabbis taught that you're allowed to give items to a Gentile on chol hamoed with the understanding that the work is going to be done after chol hamoed. Okay, uva moed osir, but you wouldn't be allowed to give on chol hamoed these items to a Gentile to do for you on chol hamoed. That would not be allowed. But if it's to do it after chol hamoed, then that is permitted. Klal shadavar, here's the rule: kol shu ose om l'nachiv ose. Anything that a yid is allowed to do on chol hamoed, so he can also instruct a Gentile to do for him. V'choshenu ose enu om l'nachiv ose. And if a yid would be unable to do this thing, so he would be unable to instruct a Gentile to do that thing as well. Tanidach, we learn another brayso, mekabel kibolos b'moed la'asos la'achar moed. So you can provide materials to a Gentile on chol hamoed with the understanding that the work will be done after chol hamoed. As long as, I guess, when preparing these items to give to the Gentile, he doesn't measure, he doesn't weigh, he doesn't count in the same way that he does during the week. So we really, we don't want you doing sort of work and giving to Gentiles work. You got to be careful. You can give it to him to do after the Moed, after the festival, but not during the festival, and you can't kind of, provide the materials in a way that is similar to how you would do it during the week. Tanya Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, in my being be'ema b'chula shamoed, we do not, breed animals on chol hamoed, right? You take a boy animal and a girl animal, and you make a shidduch, and it's effort. You gotta take the boy and the girl and bring them together. So it's a lot of effort, and therefore we don't do it on chol hamoed. Kayavot sebo, in my being b'bechor and oichet, we do not, just in general, we do not breed with a bechor, a firstborn animal. That's like, right, that you just have to let it graze. You can't do any work with it. Or if you have a korban that got a mum, also you just got to leave it alone, or you can eat it if you kind of sell it, but you can't do any work with it. So also you wouldn't be able to breed them. Tanya Idach, we learn in another brayse in my bin behema b'chulo shamoed. We do not breed these animals on chol hamoed. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, it says Rabbi Yehuda chamor shetava my bin aleh zachar. However, the exception is that if you have a female donkey that is looking to mate with a male donkey, my bin aleh zachar, in that case you actually can facilitate their breeding b'shvil shelo titztanin, so that she doesn't sort of lose interest, because I guess apparently once she loses interest, it's hard to regain it. However, other animals, you would just, you wouldn't actually proactively breed them on chol hamoed. You could put them into like a pen or whatever, like I guess an area where you put animals and they'll do their thing. They'll breed on their own. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, ein midairin, we do not fertilize, manurize, get animals to defecate on your floor, on on your field. Yeah. So we don't have animals come and defecate on your field on Shabbos and Yom Tov, and not on chol hamoed. But if sort of like the manure company came, I guess that was a thing, because you'd have these Gentiles, or at least in our case Gentiles, and they would come with their animals, let them graze on your land, defecate, and leave. And I guess that was a service. Okay, thanks for your service. They Messiah awesome, but we can't. So who am I? So we don't have them come for us. It's funny. It makes me think of like, what's that thing called in Chutz La'aretz where they come and clean your gutters? Is that what's called Ned Stevens or something? They come in the orange trucks. So I remember like someone like you like never knew when they were going to come or something. So randomly they would show up on Shabbos or whatever, and like you didn't know when they were going to come. All of a sudden it's like Yom Tov for Shabbos. It's like, oh, oops. Well, this is awkward. Tinek. Everybody knows what's going on. So it's a little bit uncomfortable because everyone knows that these people are cleaning your gutters on Shabbos, and makes you feel all awkward and everything. So Akoponim. So that was like the precursor to Ned Stevens. They would come over with animals, and guess they would smoke cigarettes and let their animals do their thing on your floor. Let's go weiter. So imedar lo b'shabbasos lo b'yom tovim v'lo b'chol hamoed v'im me'elein. But if these this company came on their own, mutter sen istak, okay, but we wouldn't help them out. Okay, we wouldn't assist them. Most loyim shomer, we wouldn't provide for them a guard, the nairis tzonam, to protect, to guard their sheep. But if the contract that you had with them was such that you hired them for the full week or for the full month, like you hired them for a week, you hired them for a month, you hired them for a year, you hired them for 7 years. So you hire them sort of long term, and they kind of come when they want. So then Messiah, you can assist them. You can provide for them a guard, linairis tonum, to guard their sheep, because in that case, you're paying for a longer amount of time, and within that time frame, they kind of come whenever they want. So then that's acceptable. Rebbe Omer says, Rebbe, Shabbos, Tova, if it's Shabbos, then you can sort of pay them back by like doing them a favor. That would be okay. Yom Tov b'mezonos, on Yom Tov you can provide them with food if you want. But Moed b'sachar, and if it's chol hamoed, you can actually pay them with real money. Rav Yosef Yichsak Rebbe, and Rav Yosef says that the halacha is like Rebbe, that on Shabbos you can kind of like, repay them by doing them a favor, if that's acceptable to them. On Yom Tov with food, and on chol hamoed with money. Friends, get to a new Mishnah. Oh, so we just talked about in the last Mishnah somebody who had olives on the olive press, and then he became a mourner, or it became a festival. So, and additionally, a fellow who had wine in a, I guess like a vat, kilu. I think the way that they would like squeeze grapes, they would like take the grapes, put it in like some kind of a press, and they would press the grapes, and then the juice would go into some kind of a vat beneath. So you squeeze the grapes, now the wine is in the vat, is in the pit. Ve'iro evel, and then he became epis a mourner. Became epis a mourner. Or alternatively, it was before the festival, and he was planning to remove the wine from the pit, but something happened, and he couldn't. Or he had workers who were meant to come and do the work, but they didn't show up. So now it's chol hamoed, and he's got this wine in the pit. What does he do? So Rabbi Yossi says, no problem, do what you got to do. Pour it into whatever you have to pour it into, complete it, seal the container, all good. That's Rabbi Yossi's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda, so says Rabbi Yehuda, no, you can't quite do everything normally, but you can sort of temporarily cover, I guess maybe a container, right? But you can't seal it properly, but you can, I think what it means is that you could pour the wine into a container, but just don't seal it properly, just so that it doesn't go bad, but you would not like Rabbi Yossi, who says that like you can just do everything normal. So now says the Gemara Utzricha. You taka need both Mishnayos, right? Meaning this Mishnah is very similar to yesterday's Mishnah. That the first one's talking about olives with an olive press. This is talking about wine with a wine press, and we're saying basically the same machlokas between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi says you can do everything normally. Rabbi Yehuda says that you have to do with some kind of a difference. So tzricha, we need both Mishnayos, the Ashmuin and Kamaisa, because if we would only have the example of the wine, so be'ayikam Rabbi Yossi. So the olives. I'm sorry. If we'd only have the example of the olives, so in be'ayikam Rabbi Yossi, I would say that's where Rabbi Yossi says. If we only have the case of olives, I would say, okay, fine. So in that case, Rabbi Yossi says you could do everything normal. Mishum, the mishcha nofish pseide, because apparently the olive oil would incur much more damage if you don't treat it properly. And therefore, Rabbi Yossi says, in that case, you'd be allowed to do everything normally. However, when it comes to wine, which apparently would not incur as much financial damage if it gets ruined, or maybe it's more difficult for it to get ruined. So in that case, Rabbi Yossi would not say that you could do everything normal. And if we would only have the case of the wine, that's where Rabbi Yehuda says that you can't just seal the barrel normally. But I would say that maybe when it comes to olive oil, maybe he would agree with Rabbi Yossi that you can do everything normally. So kamash tzricha, therefore we needed both cases because one would not be enough, because I might think that Rabbi Yehuda would admit to Rabbi Yossi when it comes to olives, and I might think Rabbi Yossi admits to Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to wine. So if we need both cases to make it clear that in both cases there is this machlokas. Amr Yitzchak bar Abba, Mantana Shinu Moed b'Dover Ovid. So it says Rav Yitzchak bar Abba, who is the Tana who says that when it comes to a Dover Ovid, when it comes to something that might, that's going to go bad, that's going to get ruined. So who's the Tana who says that if you have something that's going to get ruined, so you can kind of do whatever work it takes to salvage it, but you need to do a shinui, right? You have to do it differently. Dilok Rabbi Yossi. Well, clearly it's not Rabbi Yossi, because as the Mishnah, both Mishnahs had said, you can treat the olive oil and the wine completely normally. So whoever is the Tana who says that you have to make a shinu, you have to do things different on chol hamoed with the davar afid, it's clearly not Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yosef, halacha Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yosef says that takad halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, that you do not need to do a shinu, that you can do everything normally. So they asked Rav Nachman by Yitzchak, what about sealing a barrel of beer on chol hamoed? Who likes drinking beer? Babylon Talmud, we like beer? The Maisa, I like beer. I don't drink it very often. I don't drink anything during the week. I don't drink during the week because I have too much to do. But on Shabbos I like to drink, but usually it's wine, and also only Friday night because I'm very busy Shabbos day preparing the Daf Yomi. So the Maisa, I don't drink as much as I used to. All right, what am I going to tell you? So they want to know: can you seal a barrel of beer on chol moed? Wait, so one second. You didn't answer my question. You like beer? Omer Lehu Sinai. I'm sorry. So Omer Lehu. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak responds. Well, Sinai, friends. Who's Sinai? Think back to Daf Samach Daled of Masechta Brachos. Omer Halacha Rav Yosef. Well, Sinai, Rav Yosef said that the halacha is like Rav Yossi. They can do everything normally. So of course you can seal a barrel of beer. So the Gemara says, yeah, but Rav Yossi only said the halacha by wine. That by wine you'd be allowed to seal the barrel normally. How do I know that he would say the same thing by beer? And for the Gemara, Chamra Taimamai, how come when it comes to wine, Rabbi Yossi says that you're allowed to seal the barrel normally? Because it's going to get ruined and it's going to cause financial damage. Shechonami Isba Pseida. So also by beer there is damage if you do not seal it properly. The Amar Abaye, because Abaye says Amar Li'aim, that my mother, which of course is Abaye's nurse because he was an orphan, Barshis Save Vishia Mibar Tamne Vloshia, that it's six sa'ah of beer that's been sealed is preferable to 8 sa'ah of beer that has not been sealed. I.e., better to take less beer, but from a sealed container, a sealed barrel, rather than more beer, but from an unsealed barrel. So we see that there's value in sealing it, and otherwise it gets ruined. So therefore, the halacha would be like Rabbi Yossi by beer as well, because it's basically the same logic as by wine. Amr of Chama bar Guria Amar Rab, says of Chama bar Guria in the name of Rab, Hilchos Moed ki Hilchos Kutim. That is a very interesting statement, that the halachis of Chol Moed are like the halachis of the Kutim. Friends, who are the Kutim? The Kutim are these people who converted to Judaism because they were scared of getting eaten by the lions. So they basically converted to Judaism with in the interest of getting the protection of God, of Hashem. So the thing is about the Kutim was that they were a little bit selective in the mitzvahs that they did. The mitzvahs that they did, they went ad asof. They mamish did very beautifully. But the mitzvahs that they didn't do, they didn't do. And therefore, there's no rhyme and reason about it, right? Some things they did, some things they didn't. You couldn't say that, well, because they do this, they do that. It was hard to connect the dots. So, it says of Cham bar Guria in the name of Rab, Hilchos Moed, Hilchos Kutim, that the halachas of Chol Moed are sporadic, they're random, they're like the halachas of Kutim. What's the nafkamina? Amr of Daniel bar Katina Lomar Shin Akuris Vein Lemedo Zomizo. It means that they are barren, right? Like a woman who's barren, who doesn't have any children. It's just her. There's no children. There's no extensions, and therefore also these halachas, they are halachas. It's just them. There's no additional parallels that could be drawn or additional nafkaminas, right? That you can't learn out one from the other. They just exist in isolation. The Amr Shmuel says Zovsin Kuzasa ve'ein Zovsin Chavisa. That Shmuel says that you're allowed to take a pitcher and coat it with tar, ve'ein Zovsin Chavisa, but you would not be allowed to take a barrel and cover it and coat it with tar. Rav Dimi min Arda Amr Zovsin Chavisa ve'ein Zovsin Kuza, and says Rav Dimi from Narda that you're allowed to cover a barrel with pitch. I don't know if I said tar a second ago, but pitch. I don't know what the difference is. Vein Zovsin Kuzasa, but you're not allowed to coat a pitcher with pitch. Okay? And Shmuel, who says that you're allowed to coat the pitcher but not the barrel, he's concerned about tircha. He doesn't want you to put in too much effort, and therefore you can, apply the coating of pitch to a pitcher, but not to a barrel. Whereas Rav Dima ben Arda says he's concerned about pseida, about losing out. You're allowed to put the pitch on the barrel so that it doesn't cause financial loss if anything gets ruined. But the pitcher isn't particularly significant, so therefore you can't apply a pitch to the pitcher. And therefore somebody who kind of hears these halachas, right, he sees that Shmuel says that you can coat a pitcher, so you might think that you can also coat a barrel because it's you can lose a lot of wine. And if you only heard from Rav Dima ben Arda, you might think, well, if you can coat a barrel, certainly you can coat a pitcher because it's not as much effort. And but the fact of the matter is you can't learn out one from the other. So when it comes to halachas of chol hamoed, you can't logically make parallels and say, well, if you could do this, you can't do that. No, everything is just kind of in its own vacuum, and everything is kind of separate when it comes to chol hamoed. Amar Abaye, so says the Heliker Abaye, Naktinon, Hilchos Moed ki Hilchos Shabbos. This is super interesting. That we say that the halachas of chol hamoed are like the halachas of Shabbos. What about the halachas of Shabbos? Friends, we learn Masechta Shabbos. Tell me, what are the categories of things that are not allowed to be done on Shabbos? Well, there are certain things that, like your chayiv skila or kares. There are certain things that are pater aval aser, that if you do them, so you're pater, you don't have to bring a korban, but you're not allowed to do them. And then there are certain things that are completely mutter. It says Abaye that the malacha on chol hamoed is analogous to Shabbos to the extent that yeshmein pater aval aser v'yeshmein mutter lechatchila, that there are certain melachis on chol hamoed that are pater aval aser, that you're not allowed to do them, but you're pater. You don't have to bring a korban, or there's no punishment. And certain things are permitted. However, there's nothing that you chayiv skila or karis or anything like that on chol hamoed. Right? Certain things, right? When we said that, like you're not allowed to, according to Shmuel, you're not allowed to apply pitch to coat a barrel with pitch. What if you do? So it's pater aval aser. It's not allowed, but you're pater. You're not chayiv a korban or anything like that. So says Abaye, when it comes to halachos of chol hamoed, so the things that are not allowed are not they're pater aval aser. Right? It means that you're not allowed to do them, but if you do, then you're pater. And then there's certain things that you're mamash allowed to do. Rav Huna, chadzdu lechatzim b'mada. So Rav Huna, they harvested his field for him on chol hamoed. Eisvei Rabba bar Rav Huna le Rav Huna. So now Rav Huna's son Rabba bar Rav Huna asked his father, Tochanin kemach b'moed l'tzarech hamoed v'shelo l'tzarech hamoed aser. One second, we have a brayso that says that when it comes to flour, you're allowed to grind flour on chol hamoed for if you need it for chol hamoed. Okay, v'shelo l'tzarech hamoed aser. But you're not allowed to grind to make flour. I guess to grind flour. Or to mill flour, to make flour. I don't know. You can't do that if it's for after chol hamoed. So you can produce flour if you need it on chol hamoed, but not for after chol hamoed. Davar she'avud b'moed mutar la'asoso b'moed. Davar she'eno avud b'moed aser. Okay, and then continues the brayso, and it says that a davar ha'avid, right, something that is going to get ruined if you don't tend to it. So then you're allowed to tend to it on chol hamoed. So davar she'eno avud b'moed, but something that if you don't do it, if you neglect it on chol hamoed, it's okay, it's not going to get ruined. Aser. So then you're not allowed to do it on chol hamoed, right? Only something that's going to get ruined can you do malacha. When do we say that if it's a davar avid, you could do the malacha on chol hamoed? B'talush min hakarka. That's something that is disconnected from the ground. Avol mechuber lekarka. But if it's connected to the ground, afilu kulo avud. Aser. If it's connected to the ground, so then even if the entire thing is going to be destroyed, aser, you're not allowed to harvest it. But if it's a fellow who doesn't have anything food to eat, so you have crops that are connected to the ground, wheat or something connected to the ground, and you have a fellow who doesn't have any food to eat, so even though we just said that if it's connected to the ground, you're not allowed to harvest it, but if you don't have any food to eat, kotzer, you can harvest it, and you can sort of gather it together in a pile, v'dash, and thresh it, v'zor, and winnow it, uvor v'tochen, and to select it and grind it, uvachlo yidosh b'paros, as long as you don't thresh with cows. So what do we see? So we see in this brisa that if you have something connected to the ground, if you have wheat, stalks of wheat that are still connected to the ground, you're certainly not allowed to harvest them on chol hamoed. So Rabbi Bar Rav Huna is asking his father, I don't understand, how could it be that these workers harvested for you on chol hamoed if you're not allowed to harvest on chol hamoed? Even if everything is going to get ruined, you can't harvest on chol hamoed. If you don't have anything to eat, that's a different story, but Rav Huna had food to eat. So Amar la yichidahi v'losvir lan kavase. So Rav Huna responds to his son Rabbi Bar Rav Huna. He says, look, that brisa is a das yochid. It's an individual opinion, and we don't paskin like that opinion. The Tanya is we learn in the brisa klal Amar Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. That Reb Shimon ben Gamliel said Mishum Reb Yossi, in the name of Reb Yossi, and that's right. It's Reb Yossi's opinion. Davar atalush min akarka. That's something that is separated, right? That's disconnected from the ground. Afilu miktsaso avud mutter. So if you have something that is disconnected from the ground, so even if only part of it is going to get ruined, you're allowed to sort of do whatever malacha, do whatever work you have to do to it, to all of it, even though only part of it's going to be ruined. But if it's disconnected from the ground, you could sort of work through all of it. And if you have epis that's connected to the ground, afilu kulo avud aser. Even if the entire thing is going to be ruined, nonetheless, it is forbidden, right? If it's connected to the ground, so then you can't do anything with it. So therefore, we see that that's specifically the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, who says that when something is connected to the ground, you can't do anything with it. However, says Rav Huna, we don't paskin like Rabbi Yossi, and that's why it was acceptable for those workers to harvest this field for him. V'i Rabbi Yossi Yadu Shnami Biparus. But now, affect the Gemara. 1 second. How could that brisa that we quoted a minute ago? How could that be Rabbi Yossi? Right. The brisa that says by a davar aved you're allowed to do malacha, but it's only if it's disconnected from the ground. If it's connected to the ground, you can't. But if you don't have any food to eat, then you could do everything. Just don't thresh with cows. But how could that be Rabbi Yossi's opinion, not to thresh with cows? For Rabbi Yossi, Yadu Shnami Biparus. He should be allowed to thresh with the cows. Because Rabbi Yitzchak bar Abba, right? This is what we said a few minutes ago, right? Yeah, exactly. That's what we said on Yud Beis Amud Aleph. Mantana shinu b'moed b'davar avid delok Rabbi Yossi. Who is the opinion who says that you have to do a shinur, that you have to do things differently on chol hamoed when you're doing malacha for a davar avid? We said it's not Rabbi Yossi. So therefore, if in this brisa we're saying that if you don't have any food to eat, so then you're allowed to harvest and do whatever processing you have to do, just don't thresh with cows. Why not? If it was Rabbi Yossi, you don't have to do a shinui. So Amalach, so he would say to you, Acha nami kevim d'chol yoma lav b'paros daishe hoid nami lav shinui hu. So Rabbi Yossi would reply and say that no, even in this case, even Rabbi Yossi, who says that you don't need to make a shinui, in this case still we would not thresh with the cows, because he's not anyways threshing with cows. He doesn't usually thresh with cows, and therefore by saying don't thresh with the cows on chol hamoed, it's not actually making any change, and that is why right. So since he's not threshing with cows anyways in general, it's no change, it makes no difference, it doesn't change anything by saying that he should not thresh with cows. So we could say that brisa is Rabbi Yossi, and that's why the brisa is saying not to harvest crops whatsoever. But Rav Huna would say that we don't paskin like that brisa, we don't paskin like Rabbi Yossi, Tana Rabbanan. The rabbis taught, Tochani b'moed l'tzorech hamoed, you can grind on chol hamoed, to use it on chol hamoed, v'shelo l'tzorech hamoed aser. But you're not allowed to grind on chol hamoed for use after chol hamoed. V'im tochan v'hosi areze mutter. Now if you ground for use on chol hamoed and there was leftovers, so b'seder, it's okay. Kotzin eitzim b'moed l'tzorech hamoed. You can cut trees on chol hamoed to use the wood on chol hamoed. V'shelo l'tzorech hamoed also. But you would not be allowed to cut the wood for use after chol hamoed. V'im kotzis v'osi areza mutter. But if you cut wood and there was leftovers, okay, we said you can use it after chol hamoed, it's fine. Matilin shecha b'moed l'tzorech hamoed. You're allowed to brew beer on chol hamoed if you're planning to drink it on chol hamoed. V'shelo l'tzorech hamoed also. But do not brew beer on chol hamoed for use after chol hamoed. Ve'im hitel hosir hareze mutter. But if you brewed beer and there was leftover, right? So meaning you brewed beer for use on chol hamoed, but there was leftover, hareze mutter. That is okay. Yarim, as long as he is not sneaky, as long as he's not tricky, right? Kilu. We're saying that if you're brewing beer or doing any of these things, grinding wheat, whatever it is, on chol hamoed, and we're saying that as long as it's for use on chol hamoed, it's okay. And okay, if there's leftover beseder, that's fine. But don't intentionally, make too much and say, oh yeah, it just happens to be leftover. No, don't be sneaky. For a minute, what do you mean you can't be sneaky? We have a contradiction. Matilin shecha b'moed, you're allowed to brew beer on chol hamoed, l'tzorech hamoed, for use on chol hamoed, v'shelo l'tzorech hamoed also. But you're not allowed to brew beer on chol hamoed for after chol hamoed. Whether we're talking about date beer or barley beer, which is interesting. I think the default in the Gemara is date beer, but here we're mentioning barley beer, which I believe is the beer that we drink, is barley beer. I guess, or at least most of us. And says the Brisa, and even though he already has beer, he already has old, right? He's got beer. He already has beer, but still he could make. If he wants, he could still just say, no, I need to make this new beer and, drink, right, in order to drink from the new beer on chol hamoed. Right, so you could just say that, he needs this beer for chol hamoed, even though he doesn't, but he could say he does, and he drinks it on chol hamoed and shows, you see, I really need it, just because he wants to be able to make new beer. So what do we see? So one price is saying that he's not allowed to be sneaky. Here he's saying that he is allowed to be sneaky. He's allowed to, make this new beer even though he already has beer. So Tanoi, we say, well, it's machlokas Tanoim. The Tan is, as we learn in the Brisa, ein marim b'chach, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Omer marimin. The Tanakama says you're not allowed to be sneaky. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda says you are allowed to be sneaky. So we see it's taka, a machlokas Tanoim, whether you're allowed to be sneaky or not. Alright. Rav, chadz dulei chatzda b'chulad moada. Rav, they harvested for him his field on chol hamoed. Shama Shmuel ikpid. Shmuel heard and he got upset. So Shmuel says, what's the deal? Why is Rav harvesting his field on chol hamoed? So now the Gemara is saying, wait, so why was Shmuel getting all upset that Rav was harvesting his field? Isn't that just the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, who says that you're not allowed to harvest? I thought Rav Huna said that that's a Das Yochid, and we don't paskin like him. So is Shmuel deciding that the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi? Who's the Yechidah, who's the single opinion? No. Chadz de dechite hava d'lo hava pasid. Well, no, it was wheat, and wheat you don't need to if you don't harvest it on chol hamoed, so it would be fine. It's not a davar of it, right? Even right. The only time you're allowed to do malacha would be for a davar of it, something that's going to get ruined. But this was wheat. The wheat wasn't going to get ruined. So Shmuel says, I don't understand. Why would Rav? Why would these people harvest the wheat for Rav if it's not like it's going to go bad anyways? So for Rav, my time of Avrachi. So if that's the case, then how come Rav harvested this wheat? So Ein lo mayochel hava. Well, he didn't have any food. He didn't have any food to eat. And therefore, that's why. It's very interesting. That Rav, I guess, was very poor. He didn't have any food to eat. So therefore, he harvested this wheat on chol hamoed. Ushmuel lo seimua kame, and Shmuel wasn't aware of that. Hinami adam choshev shami. Or alternatively, Shmuel felt that Rav is obviously a very important person, and therefore, even though he doesn't have any food to eat, he still shouldn't be harvesting, or at least have people harvest for him. Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya nafak b'chumrisa d'madosha. Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya went out with a special with the special ring. So he went out to his courtyard on Shabbos wearing a special ring. And he also drank water that was heated up by an Aramean, i.e. a Gentile cook. So Sham Reb Ami Ikbid. Reb Ami heard, he says, what's going on? Why is Reb Yehuda Nasiya doing these things? So Reb Yosef says, my time Ikbid. How come Reb Ami is getting upset? If he's concerned about the taking out the ring on Shabbos, Otani, we learn in the Brisa, Ashirin v'anizomim v'atabos, that brooches, what are brooches? I don't know, but brooches and nose rings and rings, they're just like regular vessels. You can carry them in a courtyard. What's the problem? If maybe Reb Ami was getting upset because Reb Yehuda Nasiya drank water that was heated up by an Aramean cook, that anything that can be eaten raw, so you don't have to worry about bishulei nachrim. Bishulei nachrim means that we don't eat food that has been cooked by a Gentile. Now, if it's something that can be eaten raw, such as water can be drank in cold, so then it doesn't matter if it was heated up by a Gentile. So, what was the big deal? So, Reb Yehuda Nasiya did two things. He went out with his fancy ring to his chotzer on Shabbos, and he also drank water that was heated up by a Gentile. So Rav Yosef says, I don't understand. Rav Ami got upset with Reb Yehuda Nasiya. Rav Yosef says, I don't understand. What did he do wrong? You're allowed to wear a ring in your chotzer, and you're allowed to drink water that was heated up by a Gentile. So Adam Choshev Shain. The Gemara says, well, a very important person like Reb Yehuda Nasiya is different. He's an exception to the rule, and he shouldn't be doing these things. Amar Rav Chananel Amar Rab. So Rav Chananel, the name of Rab, quotes, it's Adam Dekel B'Moed. A fellow can cut down a palm tree on chol hamoed. Even though he doesn't need it, elul in a source shelo, only for its sawdust. Nonetheless, it's okay. It says of Chananel in the name of Rab, they'd be allowed to cut down a palm tree on chol hamoed. La'it Allah Abaye, but Abaye taka cursed. Okay, so Abaye cursed anybody who did that. So Rav Chananel said in the name of Rab that a fellow is allowed to cut down a palm tree on chol hamoed, even though he only needs the sawdust. But la'it Allah Abaye, but Abaye would curse anybody who would do this. Okay, that's something you want to avoid. As we're going to see, Rav Ashi Avalei Abba Bishlanyo. Rav Ashi had a bunch of trees, a forest in a place called Shlanya. Also, the miktzai b'chol d'moada. So Rav Ashi said, why don't I go and cut it on chol hamoed? Omle Rav Shila Mishlanya le Rav Ashi. So Rav Shila from Shlanya says to Rav Ashi, my daitech dika Omer Rav Chananel Omer Rab quotes it's Adam Dekel B'Moed. So now Rav Shila from Shlanya says to Rav Ashi, says, I don't understand. How come you're cutting down this palm tree on chol hamoed? Is it because Rav Chananel says in the name of Rab that it's allowed? Even though you might only need sawdust. Shelo. But what about Rav Ashi? What about the fact that Abaye curses anybody who cuts down a palm tree on chol hamoed? So Omar Lei, so Rav Ashi responds to Rav Shila from Shlanya, Lo shmirli klomer lo svirli. He says, look, I don't hold of Abaye. Kilu Rab says that you're allowed to cut down these palm trees on chol hamoed. That's what I'm going to do. Right? The fact that Abaye says, says it's no good, and anybody does it is cursed. I'm not too concerned about it. Ishtimit narge boye lemifsike leshake shavke v'adarasa. And then, lo and behold, the axe slipped and almost cut off Ashi's leg. Shavke v'adarasa. So he figured, so he got spooked out, and he said, I'll do it another time. Kilu. Rav Chananel had said in the name of Rab that you're allowed to cut down a palm tree on chol hamoed. Abaye cursed anybody who would do it. Rav Ashi wasn't too scared about the hocus pocus, but then the Maisa, he almost cut off his leg. Whoa, that sounds chaval. Rav Yehuda Shar Lemeker Kitano. Rav Yehuda says that you're allowed to uproot flax, miktol, kshusa, and to cut hops like from beer. A lot of beer in today's daf. L'meker sumsme, and to uproot sumsme, which apparently is not sesame seeds. All right. Amalei Abayla of Yosef says, Abayta of Yosef b'shlama kitana chazi lechfifa. I understand why you can, uproot flax, because you can use it to cover like vegetables and stuff. Kshusa chazi l'shechra. Hops, of course, you can use to make beer. Elasumsme lemay chazi lenazia deisbu. What are these sumsme good for? They're good for whatever. They're seeds that produce oil. All right. I mean, it feels like it could be sesame, but anyways. Rabbi Yanai had a certain orchard that the time to harvest it happened to coincide with chol hamoed, katfe. So he harvested it. The shana shayua kuli amal fardasayu lechulam b'dumoada. So the next year, everyone says, "Oh, okay. Well, Rabbi Yanai harvested his field, his orchard on chol hamoed. We'll do the same thing next year." So the next year, everybody waited till chol hamoed to harvest their orchards. After Rabbi Yanai lefardase haushata, and that year Rabbi Yanai made his orchard hefker, ownerless, in order to indicate that his intention was certainly not for everybody to hold off until chol hamoed. Kilu, the previous year, he harvested his orchard on chol hamoed because it happened to be that it fell out, it coincided with chol hamoed. But then he saw that now everybody was waiting till chol hamoed. He's like, no, that wasn't the point. So to show that like he wasn't doing the same thing this year, he actually made his field ownerless, so that, to make a point that that you really shouldn't just specifically bedavka wait until chol hamoed to harvest your orchard, and that kilu he regrets having made that sentiment, caused that sentiment the previous year. It says the Mishnah, Machnus Adam Perosim Pnei Ganovim, a fellow could bring in his fruits to the house because he's concerned about thieves. V'shol Pishtanim and Amishra, he could take out his flax from what it's soaking in, B'shvil Shelo Te'ovid, so it doesn't get ruined. But don't just, as long as you don't intend to hold off and save this work to do on chol hamoed. Im konu melachton b'moed, im kivnu melachton b'moed ye'avdu. But in all of these cases, if people specifically said, "Oh yeah, chol hamoed, I got plenty of time, let me save this work for chol hamoed," so then forget about it. You just got to let them get ruined. So kilu, if it happens to be that you need to take the flax out of whatever it's soaking in on chol hamoed, so beseder. But don't specifically kind of say, "Oh, let me just wait until chol hamoed and I'll do my work then because I have plenty of time." That do not do, and if you do, then forget about it. It's got to get ruined. Tana, we talk a little in the Brayso when we said that you could take in your fruits out of concern of thieves, just do it sort of quietly. The Soch Beis went to his house. Rav Yosef Avale Kshure, Rav Yosef had these beams that he had to bring inside. Ailinu b'yamama, and he took them inside during the day. Abai says to Rav Yosef, so I thought that the Brayso says they should bring them into your house sort of quietly. Why are you doing it in the middle of the day? Rav Yosef says, look, when it comes to beams, so the way that you do it quietly is davka during the day. Because if you bring in beams to the house at night, you're going to need more people, you're going to need torches, and it makes a whole scene, and it's certainly not sort of, quietly anymore. So therefore, it actually works out better if you just bring in the beams during the day. It ends up being less of a scene. Well, friends, what can I tell you? That was Daf Yud Beis of Masechta Moed Katan. In the first part of the Daf, we talked about all sorts of interesting arrangements that you can have with Gentiles doing work on Shabbos. If it's piecemeal, there's no deadlines as long as it's outside of the Tchum Shabbos, and maybe you have to make sure that there's no other cities around, and all sorts of things. Depends also maybe what kind of a deal you have in terms of, do you pay them for the work done? Do you pay them once a week, once a month, once a year, once every 7 years? Right? So there's different things in terms of how involved you're allowed to get with them. Is it permitted for them to come? All sorts of interesting questions like that. We saw a Mishnah about, if you have grapes in the grape press and they're in like the pit. So Rabbi Yehuda says that you can sort of transfer the juice to a barrel, but you can't really seal it properly, whereas Rabbi Yossi says that you can do everything normally. So a very interesting halacha that, two interesting things, right? One was that Rav says that when it comes to halachas of chol hamoed, you actually can't learn out, they're kind of like disparate, you can't really learn out one from the other. And we said that when it comes to chol hamoed, says Abai, these melachas, you're not like chayev, skila or korban chatas or anything. They're all, when we say that you're not allowed to do things in chol hamoed, it's pater, aval, aser. And then there are certain things that are mamish, mutter, lechatchila. And we talked about doing things on chol hamoed, specifically for chol hamoed. For example, you can create flour if you're going to use it on chol hamoed, or beer if you can use it on chol hamoed, but don't create it for after chol hamoed. But nonetheless, if there's leftover, so then that would be acceptable. Okay, and then we got to a new Mishnah and they said that, if you're concerned about thieves or anything, you can bring fruits into the house, and you should ideally do it quietly. Alright, friends, that was Daf Yud Beis of Masechta Moed Katan. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.